Ashley Miller had it all: popular, charming, and beloved by everyone in the small town of Georgetown. But during her senior prom, she vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions. After an extensive yet fruitless search, the investigation was eventually closed. 4 years later, everything changed when a local hunter made a chilling discovery in the depths of the swamp: a perfectly preserved, unmistakable yellow tiara. What really happened to Ashley Miller that night? The truth hidden beneath Georgetown's dark waters is more disturbing than anyone imagined. ***, May 22, 2019. Georgetown High School, Georgetown, South Carolina. The school gymnasium was transformed into a glittering ballroom. Silver streamers cascaded from the ceiling, reflecting shimmering shades of violet and blue across polished wooden floors. Clusters of teenagers laughed, danced, and posed for selfies beneath lights strung from one basketball hoop to another. At the center of it all stood Ashley Miller, effortlessly radiant in her pastel blue gown, the color carefully selected months earlier. Her golden hair cascaded gently down her shoulders, and a playful smile constantly danced across her lips. But tonight, the one detail everyone seemed to notice was the vibrant yellow tiara perched delicately on her head, her trademark since freshman year. Ashley was undeniably the heart of the senior class. Approachable, funny, and empathetic, she easily flowed between groups, weaving friendships across different social circles. Wherever Ashley went, laughter and warmth followed. She stood now near the refreshment table, joking with her closest friends: Olivia, a feisty redhead known for her sarcastic wit, and Rachel, quiet yet perceptive. Nearby, Kyle Dawson, her boyfriend since sophomore year, stood snapping candid photos of the night, capturing memories he hoped would last forever. "Smile, Ash," Kyle called, lifting his camera. Ashley rolled her eyes playfully before striking an exaggerated pose, one hand dramatically placed on her hip. The camera clicked, and Kyle grinned affectionately, reviewing the image on the screen. "Perfect," he whispered, softly enough only he could hear. The night flowed seamlessly, every moment filled with joy. Music pulsed through the air, rhythms inviting couples and friends onto the dance floor. Amid the joyful chaos, Ashley danced with Kyle, the pair easily recognizable as one of Georgetown High's most admired couples. Around 10:30 p.m., Ashley excused herself briefly from Kyle's side. "Be right back," she murmured into his ear, squeezing his hand. Kyle nodded, watching as Ashley slipped gracefully through the crowd, her yellow tiara glinting brightly beneath the shimmering lights. That was the last time Kyle Dawson ever saw Ashley Miller. Minutes passed 5, then 10. Kyle glanced repeatedly toward the gym entrance, anticipating her return. Anxiety slowly crept in, tightening his chest. He turned to Rachel and Olivia, concern darkening his features. "Have you guys seen Ashley?" he asked, trying to mask the sudden worry in his voice. Rachel shook her head, her smile fading. "Not since she went outside." Kyle immediately headed toward the door, pushing through the students mingling around. Outside, the cool night air struck his face. He scanned the parking lot, dimly illuminated by street lamps. Silence wrapped around him, heavy and foreboding. "Ashley?" he called, softly at first, then louder, urgency mounting. "Ashley?" His heart hammered in his chest as he noticed something on the ground near the gym's side entrance. A cell phone glittering in the pale lamplight. Kneeling, Kyle felt his throat close as he recognized the familiar case adorned with tiny daisies. Ashley's phone. Frantically, Kyle dialed Olivia, his voice strained. "Get out here now. Ashley's gone." In moments, panic spread rapidly throughout the gym. Friends and classmates began searching, voices echoing through hallways, bathrooms, and nearby buildings. Soon teachers and faculty joined, faces etched with disbelief and concern. Within an hour, Georgetown police arrived, lights slicing through the darkness, bathing the school grounds in stark, unnatural clarity. Sheriff Alan Moore, a seasoned officer, familiar with Georgetown's tranquil routine, now faced something deeply unsettling. He approached Kyle first, gentle but direct. "Son, when was the last time you saw her?" Kyle repeated the details again, desperation coloring every word. Moore listened carefully, noting each detail with methodical calm. He had known Ashley her entire life, had watched her grow up within this small community. The disappearance seemed impossible, almost surreal. Back at Ashley's home, Martha and Jason Miller sat nervously, sensing immediately something was wrong as a police cruiser stopped in front of their modest colonial house. Sheriff Moore stepped from his vehicle, his face solemn. Jason met him halfway up the drive. "Sheriff, what's happened?" "It's Ashley," Moore replied gravely, feeling a painful tug in his chest as the parents' faces drained of color. "She's missing. We're searching the area now." Martha, standing in the doorway, felt her knees buckle, gripping the doorframe for support. "Missing? What does that mean, Alan? Where could she have gone?" Sheriff Moore shook his head slowly, voice reassuring yet deeply serious. "We're doing everything we can. Every officer available is out there. We'll find her." Within hours, the entire town was involved. Flashlights pierced through the night, volunteers combing woods, parking lots, backyards, and parks. But each search ended the same way, empty handed. By dawn, Georgetown was transformed. Whispers and theories already flooding social media. Television crews arrived, news spreading across the state that the beloved Ashley Miller was missing. Through it all, Kyle Dawson stood on the fringes, haunted by his final moments with her, replaying every detail, convinced he missed something vital. Days passed agonizingly slow, each bringing renewed hope that dwindled quickly into painful frustration. Detectives interviewed friends, family, and staff repeatedly, searching desperately for some overlooked detail. But no one had seen or heard anything unusual. Ashley had simply vanished. The Millers, consumed by heartbreak and fear, pleaded publicly for anyone with information to come forward. Tearful press conferences brought even the toughest officers to the verge of tears. Yet the more they searched, the deeper the mystery became. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The case cooled painfully, slipping further from public memory. As the investigation hit dead ends repeatedly, Sheriff Moore, burdened by personal responsibility and community pressure, refused to close the case officially, though he privately feared it was beyond solving. On a rainy afternoon nearly 6 months later, Sheriff Moore stood quietly outside Georgetown High School, gazing at the entrance where Ashley had vanished. Kyle Dawson approached slowly, his eyes weary from months of sleepless nights. "Any news, Sheriff?" Kyle asked, though the question felt hollow now. Moore sighed deeply, meeting the younger man's desperate gaze. "I'm sorry, Kyle. Every lead has dried up. Every clue has led nowhere." Kyle nodded, anguish etched deep in his expression. "Do you think we'll ever find out what happened?" The sheriff hesitated, searching for words of hope but finding none. "I honestly don't know," he admitted softly, voice heavy with regret. "I've never seen a case like this. No evidence, no witnesses, no clues. It's as if Ashley vanished into thin air." A heavy silence hung between them, broken only by the steady drizzle tapping gently on the sidewalk. Finally, Kyle turned away, disappearing quietly into the rain. Sheriff Moore remained alone, staring into the empty space where a young woman full of life had vanished without a trace. He shook his head slowly, uttering softly to himself the haunting words that would linger heavily over Georgetown for years to come. We've got nothing. Absolutely nothing. And with those grim words hanging in the air, the first chapter of Georgetown's darkest mystery came quietly to a close, leaving unanswered questions that would haunt the town for years. 4 years had slipped quietly past since Ashley Miller disappeared, yet Georgetown still bore the weight of unanswered questions, shadows of loss lingering in every quiet glance. But life, as always, moved on, even if reluctantly, even if painfully. Deep in the humid heart of Sampit Swamp, Eddie Carson navigated his small boat through murky waters, his keen eyes searching for any subtle sign of wildlife movement. Eddie, now 56, was a solitary man, built lean and strong from decades spent wandering these marshy labyrinths. His face was weathered by sun and rain, eyes thoughtful and guarded beneath the brim of his faded camouflage cap. His days were methodical, peaceful, following a rhythm carved by nature rather than clocks. He knew every twisted tree root, every silent creek hidden among tangled moss and heavy branches. Sampit was his sanctuary, a world that made sense amidst a reality he often felt disconnected from. It was mid-afternoon, the sky a leaden gray that pressed low above the trees, when Eddie guided his boat closer to a section of dense undergrowth. Near a small clearing, something glinted among the moss-covered roots of a partially submerged tree trunk, catching his attention. Curiosity piqued, Eddie cut the motor, drifting closer. He reached carefully over the side of the boat, tugging gently at the object tangled in the roots. His breath caught in his throat as the item came free, revealing itself clearly in his trembling hand. A delicate, vivid yellow tiara, glistening impossibly bright, untouched by the decay around it. For a long, haunting moment, Eddie stared. Even he knew this tiara, everyone in Georgetown knew it. Ashley Miller's yellow tiara, as famous in town as her bright smile, was now sitting improbably perfect in his rough palm. Eddie's pulse quickened, anxiety twisting his stomach. This was not right. Something felt deeply wrong. Night had already fallen by the time Sheriff Alan Moore reached the Millers' front porch. Martha opened the door before he could even knock, eyes wide with an unsettling mixture of hope and fear. Beside her stood Jason, tense and silent. "Martha, Jason," Moore began gently, voice steady but strained. "We've found something you need to see." Minutes later, standing in the softly lit police station, the Millers stared silently down at the plastic evidence bag holding their daughter's unmistakable yellow tiara. Martha's hand trembled violently, reaching out as if to touch it, though separated by plastic and 4 years of unbearable grief. "It's hers," Martha whispered brokenly, tears sliding down her cheeks. Jason wrapped an arm tightly around her, grief silently pulsing between them. Sheriff Moore cleared his throat softly, voice full of cautious sympathy. "I have a detective from Charleston joining us, someone fresh who might see something we missed before." That detective was Claire Mitchell, who had arrived in Georgetown only days earlier. At 35, Claire had earned her reputation as thorough and quietly relentless. Her eyes held a gentle intensity, capable of both great empathy and meticulous observation. Charleston had been home until a difficult case had pushed her toward quieter Georgetown. Yet, as she looked at the Millers now, Claire realized quiet might not be what she'd find here after all. Claire spent the following days methodically piecing together Ashley's disappearance, retracing old steps with fresh eyes. She interviewed classmates, revisited teachers, and gently approached Kyle Dawson, now 22, working as a freelance photographer. Kyle's apartment, cluttered with photography equipment and stacks of prints, carried the air of a man haunted by lost time. His once bright eyes were shadowed, expression distant. "How have you been holding up, Kyle?" Claire asked softly, noticing the dark circles beneath his eyes. Kyle shrugged, eyes fixed on the table. "Not well. Every day I wonder if I missed something back then. Every night I replay that night, looking for answers that never come." Claire noted the sincerity in his voice, the raw edge of guilt still fresh despite the passage of years. "Do you remember seeing anyone unusual that night? Someone who stood out?" Claire probed gently. Kyle hesitated, eyes narrowing slightly. "At first, I thought no. At first, I thought no. But recently, looking at old photos I took, I noticed someone strange in the background, wearing clothes from another era out of place." Claire's interest sharpened immediately. "Do you still have that photo?" He handed her a print without hesitation. The blurry figure at the gym's far corner wore clothing distinctly out of sync with contemporary styles, standing eerily still amid a moving crowd. Claire felt a chill run down her spine but carefully hid her reaction. "Thank you, Kyle," she said calmly. "I'll follow up." Later that afternoon, Claire met with Sheriff Moore and the forensic analyst, Dr. Amy Rogers, at the police station. Rogers held the tiara carefully, glancing nervously at Claire before speaking. "There's something troubling," Rogers began, hesitation in her voice. Claire looked sharply at the analyst. "What is it?" "This tiara was not exposed to the elements for 4 years. It was placed in that swamp very recently, days at most." Sheriff Moore stiffened visibly, exchanging a troubled glance with Claire. "Someone wanted us to find it," Claire murmured thoughtfully. "Someone who knew exactly how to reignite this investigation." The following days intensified. Claire revisited Sampit Swamp with Eddie Carson, carefully documenting exactly where the tiara had been found. Eddie guided Claire to the exact spot, his usually calm demeanor now replaced by unease. "Have you noticed anyone unusual here lately?" Claire questioned, eyes scanning the dense, oppressive surroundings. Eddie shook his head slowly. "Not that I've noticed. But this swamp hides secrets better than anywhere else I know." Back at the station, Claire carefully laid out everything they knew on her desk. She meticulously reviewed old reports, photographs, and notes, convinced something crucial had been overlooked in the initial investigation. Her instincts screamed that the key to finding Ashley lay in the connection between past and present. One evening, Claire found herself standing alone at the edge of the school gymnasium parking lot, precisely where Ashley vanished. She imagined the scene 4 years earlier, Ashley stepping outside, vulnerable for just a moment. But vulnerable to whom? Detective Mitchell. A hesitant voice spoke softly behind her, breaking her concentration. Claire turned quickly, noticing a thin woman, about 50 years old, clutching a worn handbag nervously. Her eyes were darting anxiously around, ensuring no one else was watching. "Yes?" Claire prompted gently, approaching carefully to ease the woman's obvious anxiety. The woman took a shaky breath before speaking, voice dropping lower, almost a whisper. "I know you're reopening Ashley Miller's case. There's something important you should see, something I kept hidden, but I can't anymore." Claire's pulse quickened immediately. "Who are you?" "I worked at the town library back when Ashley disappeared," the woman replied hurriedly. "My name's Linda Everett. I found something months after Ashley vanished, hidden inside. A book returned anonymously. At first, I thought it meant nothing, but after hearing about the tiara, I realized I couldn't keep quiet any longer." "What exactly did you find?" Claire asked, heart racing, sensing the importance of this. Revelation. Linda glanced nervously over her shoulder once more, reaching into her bag and withdrawing a carefully preserved newspaper, clearly decades old. Handing it to Claire, Linda's voice trembled as she spoke. It's a newspaper from the 1980s. It talks about another girl who vanished exactly like Ashley. Her name was Sarah Holloway. She disappeared at a school dance exactly like Ashley. Claire felt a shiver ripple down her spine as she stared down at the faded headline, realizing immediately that this case was far more complicated and far darker than anyone had imagined. Linda leaned closer, her voice shaking, eyes filled with fear. "Detective Mitchell, I think whoever took Sarah Holloway is still here, still active. And Ashley's disappearance isn't isolated. I'm scared. But someone needed to know." Claire stared back at her, the words settling heavily between them as darkness enveloped Georgetown, and old shadows emerged, ready to be exposed at last. Linda Everett's hands trembled as she carefully handed Detective Claire Mitchell the worn newspaper, its edges yellowed with age. Claire accepted it gently, her heart quickening as she unfolded the delicate pages. The air around them felt charged, thick with the weight of history. They stood beneath the dim glow of a street lamp just outside Georgetown High School, shadows playing across Linda's anxious face. "Please," Linda whispered urgently, her voice barely audible, "I don't want anyone knowing it was me who gave this to you." Claire nodded reassuringly, studying Linda's strained expression. "I promise, no one will know. You've done the right thing." Linda hesitated, eyes fearful yet resolute. "You don't understand, Detective. People in Georgetown don't like outsiders stirring up old memories." Claire met Linda's anxious gaze directly. "What exactly do you mean?" "Just read the paper," Linda murmured nervously. She glanced around once more before quickly disappearing into the darkness, leaving Claire standing alone, the newspaper trembling slightly in her grip. Back at her apartment, Claire carefully spread the fragile newspaper across her desk, squinting. Under the soft glow of a lamp, the date at the top read clearly, October 14th, 1987. Claire's gaze shifted down, her heart skipping as she read the bold headline, "Georgetown teen Sarah Holloway disappears during school dance. Police left baffled." Claire's blood turned cold. She skimmed through the article, her pulse quickening with every chilling similarity. Sarah had vanished during Georgetown High's autumn formal, last seen stepping outside alone. Just like Ashley Miller, she paused, swallowing hard. Nearly identical. Disappearances, separated by decades, both unsolved, both eerily similar. The following day, Claire returned to Georgetown's police station, confronting Sheriff Alan Moore with the newspaper. Moore's eyes widened momentarily, before narrowing defensively. "Why wasn't this mentioned before?" Claire asked sharply, holding the paper out as proof. Moore hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Sarah's case ... faded quickly. Her family moved away. People just forgot. Claire's eyes darkened. People don't just forget something like this. Did anyone ever connect these cases before now? Moore exhaled deeply, eyes clouded. Some tried, Detective. But Georgetown's a small place. People have ways of shutting down questions. Unsatisfied, Claire left Moore's office, determined to dig deeper. She spent hours poring over old records in the library archives. It became increasingly clear something had been deliberately hidden, records conveniently incomplete, pages missing or torn out. Frustrated, Claire turned her attention toward the older residents of Georgetown, hoping someone remembered Sarah Holloway and the circumstances around her disappearance. She met Edna Wallace, a retired schoolteacher, at her modest home on the outskirts of town. Edna had taught at Georgetown High during the 80s and remembered Sarah vividly. Sarah was special, Edna reminisced softly. Kind and bright, just like Ashley Miller. It broke our hearts when she vanished. Did you ever suspect anyone? Claire pressed gently. Edna shook her head slowly, eyes distant. Not who, detective? What? Claire frowned, puzzled. What do you mean, what? Edna leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if afraid someone might overhear even there. Have you heard about the Sampit Shadow? Claire's brow furrowed, skeptical yet intrigued. What's that? A local legend, Edna said gravely. It appears every few decades. Some call it a curse. Every time it emerges, someone disappears always. Young, always beloved, and always without a trace. Claire felt a chill creep down her spine. She left Edna's house with more questions than answers, her mind racing through possibilities. That evening, alone in her dimly lit office, Claire studied photographs pinned carefully to a corkboard, linking places Ashley and Sarah had last been seen. Her thoughts wandered briefly toward Eddie Carson, the quiet hunter who'd found Ashley's tiara. Something tugged at her intuition. He was old enough to have known Sarah. Could he somehow be connected? Curious, Claire retrieved Eddie's background files. Her eyes scanned documents carefully, pulse accelerating as she discovered that Eddie Carson and Sarah Holloway had been classmates and, more tellingly, high school sweethearts. Claire's curiosity intensified. Why hadn't Eddie mentioned that? She drove swiftly to Eddie's secluded cabin near the swamp, knocking firmly. Eddie opened the door, expression cautious but polite. "Detective," Eddie acknowledged softly, allowing her inside. "Eddie," Claire began carefully, "why didn't you tell me you and Sarah Holloway were close?" He froze, visibly startled. Pain flickered briefly through his eyes before he composed himself. "That was a lifetime ago," Eddie muttered, voice heavy with buried emotion. "I lost everything when Sarah disappeared. Everything changed. I left Georgetown, only came back years later, hoping the pain was gone." Claire saw deep sorrow etched in Eddie's features, genuine and raw. It softened her suspicion slightly. "Do you know anything about this Sampit Shadow?" she asked gently. Eddie visibly stiffened, eyes suddenly guarded. "It's just a ghost story." "You don't sound so convinced," Claire pressed carefully. Eddie hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "After Sarah disappeared, people talked about it a lot. But it's nonsense. Sarah was taken by someone, not something. I've spent years believing that." Claire nodded slowly, sensing she'd struck something deeper. She left Eddie's cabin with lingering suspicion but little clarity. The next day, Claire returned to Kyle Dawson's photography studio, intending a brief check-in. Kyle answered slowly, clearly fatigued. Inside, she noticed photographs scattered across his workspace, images of the Sampit swamp. Claire stepped closer, intrigued. "Why are you photographing the swamp?" Claire asked, voice deliberately casual. Kyle's gaze sharpened, suddenly defensive. "I thought it might help. Maybe someone put Ashley there. I've spent years documenting every inch, hoping I'd find something." Claire's eyes lingered on one unsettling image, deep shadows twisted through the trees, eerily resembling a human figure. "What's this?" Claire questioned sharply, pointing at the disturbing photograph. Kyle shrugged nervously. "Just a trick of the light. Swamps do strange things in photos." Claire's eyes narrowed slightly, suspicion deepening. "Can I keep this?" He hesitated briefly before nodding, clearly uncomfortable. As Claire left the studio, a disturbing feeling gnawed at her. Someone in Georgetown knew exactly what happened, someone determined to keep their secrets buried. The tension in Georgetown steadily intensified. Locals grew wary of Claire's questions. Her car tires were suddenly flattened. Overnight, clearly deliberate. Files vanished from her desk, replaced hours later in odd places. She was being deliberately intimidated. Still, Claire refused to be deterred, pressing harder despite the growing unease. Late one evening, as she returned home, exhaustion weighing heavily, Claire paused on her doorstep. Something wasn't right. Her front door stood slightly ajar, shadows pooling ominously inside. Her breath quickened. Claire's hand instinctively moved toward the holster at her hip. Stepping cautiously inside, she flicked the lights on, scanning the interior carefully. Her heart stopped. Pinned crudely to the door with a rusted knife was a sheet of paper. Words scrawled roughly in jagged handwriting. "Stop digging or you'll join them in the swamp." Claire felt the threat ripple through her. Someone was desperate enough to warn her off violently. But who? And why? Her resolve hardened instantly. Fear couldn't deter her. Not now. Not ever. She tore the note from the door, fingers tightening around the rough paper. Whoever sent this had made a critical mistake. They'd shown their hand. Claire knew she was close to uncovering something big, something someone in Georgetown had been hiding for decades. Yet as darkness wrapped silently around her house, Claire couldn't shake the cold feeling that this was only the beginning. Claire stood motionless in her living room, the threatening note crumpled tightly in her hand. The rusted knife that had pinned it to her door now lay on the table, its presence an unsettling reminder of the escalating danger surrounding her investigation. Yet, as her heartbeat steadied, Claire felt a newfound determination surging through her veins. She knew these threats meant one thing: she was closer to the truth than ever before. Ignoring the fear gnawing at the edges of her consciousness, Claire resolved to press forward. She gathered her scattered notes, her gaze pausing on the faded photograph Kyle had reluctantly given her, the ghostly silhouette hidden among shadows at Ashley's dance. Something in that blurred image tugged at Claire's instincts, something she couldn't yet articulate. The following morning, Claire intensified her investigation, poring over historical archives, determined to uncover Georgetown's buried secrets. The town's unease grew palpable. Residents who once greeted her warmly now avoided her gaze, whispering anxiously behind closed doors. Claire focused her initial efforts on Eddie Carson. His connection to Sarah Holloway felt crucial, and she was convinced he knew more than he admitted. She spent hours meticulously reconstructing Eddie and Sarah's past from scattered yearbook photos and archived newspapers. Eddie had been popular. Once a bright, promising young man whose future was destroyed when Sarah disappeared. The files painted a troubling portrait. Eddie, heartbroken and isolated after Sarah's disappearance, withdrew from society abruptly, leaving town soon afterward. When he returned years later, he was withdrawn, quiet, and obsessively protective of his solitude. Deciding she couldn't afford subtlety, Claire returned to Eddie's secluded cabin, knocking sharply on his door. Eddie answered slowly, dark circles beneath haunted eyes. "Detective Mitchell," he murmured, wary. "I need to talk to you, Eddie," Claire said firmly, stepping forward. "About Sarah Holloway." Eddie flinched, his jaw tightening visibly. "I told you everything," he whispered hoarsely. "Why keep tormenting me?" "Because I believe you haven't told me everything," Claire insisted softly. "You loved her deeply. That pain doesn't vanish. You must have suspicions, someone you suspect or something you've seen." Eddie's eyes flashed suddenly, a burst of instability she hadn't anticipated. "I didn't take Sarah," he snapped harshly, voice cracking under sudden pressure. "I searched everywhere for her, every night, every swamp. I've never stopped." Claire stepped back cautiously, sensing a dangerous volatility beneath Eddie's controlled exterior. "Eddie, calm down," she said gently. "I'm not accusing you. I need your help. He breathed raggedly, regaining partial composure, but his voice trembled. "There's darkness here, Detective. Things hidden beneath the surface. People disappear, and everyone pretends not to notice. Sarah was taken by something bigger than one man bigger than me." "What do you mean, something bigger?" Claire pressed carefully. Eddie shook his head, turning away, voice sinking low with despair. "I wish I knew, but sometimes at night, I see her out there, calling me from the swamp." Claire left Eddie deeply unsettled. His instability was clear. Yet beneath his torment, Claire sensed genuine pain rather than guilt. Her next step was Kyle Dawson. Recently cooperative, yet increasingly withdrawn. Claire hoped his photographic insights might reveal something critical. Kyle greeted her quietly, visibly tired but expectant. "I found another picture," he began immediately, handing Claire a photo. Slightly blurred with age. Claire studied it carefully, pulse quickening. It was taken 4 years earlier, the night Ashley vanished. In the background stood the same mysterious figure she'd seen before, distinctly clearer now, a tall figure. In vintage clothing, unnaturally still, eyes obscured beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Who is this?" Claire whispered, tension creeping into her voice. Kyle shook his head. "I've tried figuring that out for years. No one recognizes him. It's like he doesn't belong here or to this time." Claire felt an icy chill grip her. She thanked Kyle and hurried back to her office, mind racing with new possibilities. Desperately searching for connections, she uncovered older records from neighboring towns. Shock washed over her as patterns emerged clearly. Dozens of vanishings over decades, always near the Sampit River, always unsolved. Quickly forgotten. Georgetown, she realized grimly, was only part of a larger, darker story. That evening, exhausted but driven, Claire remained hunched over files in her office, connecting dots between decades of disappearances. A quiet knock startled her. Sheriff Alan Moore stood awkwardly at her door, his face grim. "Detective," he murmured, avoiding her eyes. "Can we talk privately?" Claire studied him carefully, reading tension in his posture. "What's wrong, Sheriff?" Moore sighed deeply, discomfort clear. "You should drop this case. You're poking around things Georgetown once left alone. People here won't tolerate outsiders meddling forever." Claire bristled, her voice sharp. "You're asking me to ignore these victims?" Moore hesitated, clearly conflicted. "I'm trying to protect you. There are forces at play here you can't begin to imagine." "Let it go." Claire narrowed her eyes, heart pounding defiantly. "I can't. I won't." Moore shook his head regretfully, stepping back into the shadows. "Then be careful, Claire. I can't protect you from everything." He vanished quietly, leaving Claire deeply unsettled. Moore's warning echoed ominously in her ears, yet she knew abandoning the investigation wasn't an option. 2 nights later, after days of hitting dead ends, Claire received an anonymous call. The voice, distorted and trembling, spoke hurriedly. "There's something hidden in Sampit Swamp, an old shack north side by the river bend. You'll find answers there." Claire barely hesitated. Minutes later, she was driving toward Sampit Swamp, flashlight and pistol beside her, tension gripping every muscle. The swamp was eerily silent as she navigated carefully, flashlight illuminating twisted branches and thick, stagnant water. Her heart raced, senses heightened. After what felt like hours, Claire found the shack obscured by dense foliage, its wooden walls rotted and covered in moss. She approached carefully, feeling dread and anticipation intertwined. Pushing the door open slowly, flashlight piercing the darkness, she gasped. Inside, the walls were covered in faded photographs, yellowed newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes, names, dates, and locations meticulously recorded, stretching back decades. The faces of missing young women stared hauntingly from countless images, their smiles frozen in time. Claire's gaze locked onto a corner photograph, Sarah Holloway smiling brightly next to a teenage Eddie Carson. Beside it was Ashley Miller's graduation portrait, her yellow tiara gleaming. Claire's breath quickened, pulse pounding in her ears. She had stumbled upon something sinister, a shrine built carefully over decades. Who had created it? Why? Suddenly, she heard faint movement outside, twigs cracking beneath cautious footsteps. Claire extinguished her flashlight, heart hammering painfully. Someone was approaching, drawing closer. She stood perfectly still, pistol raised, breath held tightly. The footsteps paused just outside the shack. Silence stretched endlessly. Claire tightened her grip, prepared for anything, but suddenly the steps retreated swiftly, disappearing into the swamp's dense shadows. Exhaling shakily, Claire stepped forward again, flashlight illuminating the feve. Photographs once more. Her thoughts raced frantically. Someone knew she was here, someone desperate enough to protect secrets at any cost. Then, as she turned, her flashlight caught something she'd missed, a small notebook partially hidden beneath an old blanket. Claire carefully lifted it, pulse accelerating as she opened its weathered cover. Scrawled hastily inside was a single chilling sentence. "They're all here, beneath the sandpit, waiting." Claire's blood ran cold. The truth, far darker than she'd imagined, lay waiting beneath these waters, hidden, buried, and violently protected. She knew she was on the brink of unraveling Georgetown's darkest secret. But she also knew this meant confronting forces powerful enough to silence an entire town. Steeling herself, Claire carefully placed the notebook in her pocket. She glanced around once more, her resolve unwavering despite fear gnawing deeply. Whatever awaited beneath the sandpit swamp, Claire was determined to face it, no matter the cost. Claire Mitchell stood frozen in front of the dilapidated shack deep within Sandpit Swamp. The crumbling structure seemed barely capable of standing, its weathered planks sagging and warped, held together by thick moss and twisted ivy. The moonlight filtered weakly through heavy branches above, casting eerie shadows across the swampy ground. An oppressive silence filled the air, interrupted only by occasional whispers of wind rustling leaves and distant splashes of unseen creatures. Claire gripped her flashlight tightly, its narrow beam slicing through darkness as she pushed the door open carefully. It groaned in protest, the hinges grinding painfully as the stale air rushed out. Inside, a sickening smell of mold, earth, and decay flooded her senses. Stepping cautiously forward, Claire's flashlight illuminated walls covered in faded water-damaged photographs curling at the edges from humidity. She felt her heart constrict as she moved closer, her eyes tracing the haunting images carefully pinned across the walls. Each photograph depicted a young woman, smiling innocently, each wearing a delicate tiara. Claire immediately recognized Sarah Holloway and Ashley Miller among them, their eyes bright, unaware of the darkness awaiting them. A table stood at the center of the room, cluttered with tarnished jewelry, ribbons, diaries, and tiny personal belongings, all carefully arranged like offerings in a twisted shrine. Claire moved slowly, her pulse quickening as she absorbed the grotesque display. This place felt like a sanctuary of madness, meticulously maintained by a disturbed mind. Suddenly, a faint noise drifted from the back corner. Barely audible, a muffled, choking sob. Claire's blood froze. Slowly, deliberately, she turned toward the sound, aiming her flashlight into a shadowed doorway. "Ashley?" Claire called softly, her voice barely a whisper. Pulse hammering in her ears, not another quiet sob answered her, sending adrenaline surging through Claire's veins. She stepped swiftly forward, pushing aside a heavy curtain that obscured a hidden space at the cabin's rear. The beam of her flashlight illuminated a frail figure curled up against the wall, trembling and terrified. Claire's breath caught sharply. It was Ashley Miller. Ashley looked shockingly thin, her once vibrant hair limp and tangled. Her eyes widened in fear at first, then confusion, slowly giving way to recognition. Double quotes Detective Mitchell. Ashley whispered. Weakly, her voice ragged, disbelief and hope mixing in her expression. Claire knelt gently beside her, instinctively wrapping her jacket around the shivering girl. "It's okay, Ashley. You're safe now," Claire reassured her softly, her own voice trembling with emotion. Tears welled uncontrollably in Ashley's eyes, streaming silently down hollowed cheeks. "I thought I'd never leave," Ashley whispered, her voice breaking. "He never let me see him clearly. Detective always a mask. He was obsessed with our tiaras, our youth. Every day, he would tell me stories about other girls he called his princesses. He never hurt me physically, but mentally. Ashley shuddered violently. "He wanted us to stay pure and frozen in time-perfect memories." Claire felt a surge of anger and sadness. "Did you see anyone else? Did he ever slip up?" Ashley shook her head weakly. "Only once. I heard him talking to someone else, another man. I think they argued once. I couldn't see him, but, Detective, there's another person." Unsure of it, Claire's mind raced rapidly, piecing together clues. She radioed urgently for assistance, carefully guiding Ashley from the hideous shack back to the safety of her car, feeling a powerful surge of protectiveness for the traumatized girl now sobbing quietly in her passenger seat. Hours later, after Ashley had been safely delivered to Georgetown General Hospital, Claire drove straight to Eddie Carson's isolated cabin, rage simmering beneath her controlled exterior. She found Eddie pacing anxiously outside, as though he anticipated her arrival. "What did you do, Eddie?" Claire demanded sharply, eyes flashing fiercely. Eddie's face twisted in confusion and pain. I don't understand. I found Ashley." Claire cut him off sharply. "She's alive, traumatized, held captive all this time. You were obsessed with Sarah Holloway. You were connected to both girls. Explain that." Eddie's knees buckled slightly, color draining from his face. "Ashley, alive. I didn't." "Stop lying." Claire's voice cracked harshly, her patience gone. "I saw your photographs. I saw your shrine to those girls. Tell me the truth, Eddie. Tell me now." Eddie sank slowly to his knees, face crumbling as decades of suppressed pain finally tore free. Tears streaked down his weathered cheeks, voice raw and broken. "I didn't mean for it to get so far," he sobbed. "After Sarah disappeared, something snapped in me. My whole life ended with her. I began collecting memories of girls who reminded me of her, young, full of life, wearing tiaras just like hers. But I swear, Claire, I never took Ashley. I never harmed anyone. I found the tiara by accident. When I saw it, I knew whoever took Sarah had struck again." Claire studied Eddie closely, reading the anguish etched deep into every line of his face. "Then who took Ashley, Eddie? Who did you speak to in that swamp?" He shook his head miserably. "Someone knew my secrets, Detective. Someone else who shared my pain but twisted it into something monstrous. I only talked to him once years ago. He said he understood my loss, my obsession. He told me I wasn't alone. But I didn't realize how far he'd go. Who is he, Eddie?" Claire pressed relentlessly. Eddie's voice trembled, eyes hollow with fear. "He never told me his name." "But he lives here, Detective, right here in Georgetown. He's watched us all for decades. He told me that night he understood me, and I felt it. I felt something darker than even my own despair. Claire knelt beside Eddie, gripping his shoulder firmly, voice urgent. "Think harder. You must know more. How did he contact you?" Eddie shook violently, his voice barely audible. "He left me notes, cryptic messages, always signed the Sampit Shadow. I thought it was sick humor at first, but soon realized it was real. Someone who knows Georgetown's deepest secrets and thrives on fear." Claire exhaled shakily, feeling the sinister weight of Eddie's revelation. This darkness ran deeper than she'd imagined, a hidden evil rooted in Georgetown's quiet streets, sustained by silence and fear. Eddie's eyes lifted desperately, meeting Claire's intense gaze. "Detective, you have to listen. He's not done. He's never done. He still walks among us. He still waits in the shadows. He told me himself there'd always be more princesses for his twisted fairy tale." Claire stood slowly, heart pounding violently. Eddie's words hung heavily in the air, sealing a terrifying truth she'd already sensed. Georgetown harbored something far worse than any single disturbed individual. It harbored a monster who had hidden behind the facade of everyday life for decades. She glanced one final time at Eddie's broken figure, grief-stricken and haunted by his choices. "I'll find him, Eddie," she whispered firmly, determined. "This ends now." Eddie stared back, voice ragged and exhausted. "Be careful, detective. You've barely scratched the surface. You're hunting something that's already hunting you." Claire left Eddie alone beneath the pale moonlight, a chill slicing through her spine as his warning echoed through her mind. As she drove away, she felt a growing certainty that the Sampit Shadow, whoever or whatever it was, already knew she was closing in. And now, she knew something even more disturbing. It wasn't acting alone. The oppressive darkness over Georgetown began to lift as dawn broke, sunlight gradually spilling through the trees. Yet, for Detective Claire Mitchell, the shadows of the night clung stubbornly, refusing to retreat. Ashley Miller had been rescued. Eddie Carson sat behind bars, awaiting charges. But Claire felt no relief, only the haunting weight of unanswered questions. Eddie's chilling confession echoed endlessly. I wasn't alone. Someone else is out there. Determined, Claire returned to the shack deep within Sampit Swamp, with daylight filtering through gaps in the roof. The eerie atmosphere seemed almost more disturbing, highlighting details previously concealed by shadows. Carefully, she re-examined the photographs scattered across the wall's faces, smiling innocently, unaware of their shared tragic fate. Among them, Claire's eyes landed on a photo previously overlooked, a candid snapshot of Ashley Miller with Kyle Dawson. Her heart twisted painfully. Could Kyle have known more than he'd let on? Her instincts rebelled at the thought, yet her investigator's mind urged caution. A sudden sound from behind startled Claire. Turning quickly, she saw Sheriff Alan Moore stepping carefully into the cabin, his face pale and burdened. "What are you doing here, Sheriff?" Claire asked sharply, instantly alert. He sighed deeply, avoiding eye contact as he approached. "Claire, there's something you need to know." "Tell me," she demanded, her voice stern. Moore hesitated, shifting uneasily. "I knew about Eddie for years, not everything, but enough. I knew he was disturbed, obsessed. But I never imagined he'd take it this far." Claire felt anger surge. "You covered it up?" His shoulders sank in defeat. "I thought I was protecting Georgetown. Small towns don't recover from scandals easily. I hoped Eddie would keep to himself. It was wrong. I see that now, but I swear, Claire, I never helped him." Claire's voice hardened, disbelief clear. "You knew about Sarah Holloway. You knew Ashley could have been saved sooner." Moore's voice cracked with anguish. I live with that regret every day. But listen, whoever Eddie worked with is still here. You have to finish this." Claire watched Moore walk away, conflicted yet focused. She needed answers that lay closer to home than she'd feared. That evening, Claire stood before Kyle Dawson's photography studio. Her heart pounded uncomfortably as she stepped inside, tension thickening the air. Kyle looked startled. To see her, guilt briefly flashing across his tired features. "Detective," he greeted uneasily. "Did you find something new?" Claire approached slowly, her voice deliberately calm. "Kyle, Eddie had help. Someone provided him with information, photographs. Someone close to Ashley." Kyle stiffened visibly, eyes widening in shock. "You can't think I loved her. Ashley was my life." "I don't think you meant harm," Claire said softly, compassion evident. "But your photographs, Eddie used them, Kyle. They guided him. They led him straight to Ashley." Kyle's eyes filled instantly with tears, denial and horror colliding. "No, that's impossible." Claire pulled out a photograph from her pocket. Kyle's signature clearly visible on the back. "You photographed Ashley everywhere she went. Eddie had access to your studio. You never noticed?" Kyle's hands trembled violently. "He came here sometimes, asked about Ashley. He said he missed Sarah and Ashley reminded him of her. I felt sorry for him. I didn't realize." Claire softened, sensing Kyle's genuine torment. "You were manipulated, Kyle. Eddie preyed on your kindness, your grief." He collapsed onto a nearby chair, face buried in trembling hands. "I just wanted to help. God, Ashley suffered because of me. You couldn't have known," Claire reassured gently, though her heart still ached. Returning later to her apartment, Claire found a sealed envelope waiting ominously on her doorstep. No return address, only her name scrawled in sharp, hurried handwriting. Heart quickening, she opened it carefully, withdrawing a single faded photograph. Claire felt the room spin. The image was clearly decades old, showing a shadowy figure standing beside the swamp. Beneath it was a simple, chilling message: "The Sampit shadow isn't just a legend. Eddie was only imitating the past. The original is still alive and waiting." Claire's rescue of Ashley unsettles Georgetown, yet ominous notes confirm that the true mastermind, the Sampit shadow, is still watching. Determined, Claire vows to keep digging despite mounting threats. At the hospital, a frail but resolute Ashley begs her not to stop. Claire promises justice. Returning home, Claire finds another warning: leave town or share the swamp's fate. Instead of yielding, she steels herself for the deeper battle ahead, knowing Georgetown's darkest secret remains alive in the shadows, ready to strike again.